Okay, so hello everyone, my name's Max. There's 18 of us who come from Canterbury. So there's a place back there actually, Canterbury Festival. It's a little place in Kent, in England. So we go to university there, and we're all part of a PGCE program. So we've all done 3 years at universities. Now we're doing 1 year to become teachers. So we've got scientists in here, we've got language students, me and other religious education teachers, and so all learning to become teachers at the end of it. So what we thought we'd do, we knew the Erasmus would be doing their sort of presentation of education, so we thought that we'd give sort of, what is English education? We thought we'd give it a go. So these are a few things which came to mind. Can anyone tell me what this place is? These buildings are, or where it is? Hand up, anyone? Yeah? It's Oxford, yeah. So Oxford and Cambridge are obviously very famous English educational systems. The things that I associate with education are exams, and obviously extracurricular activities, and then this is, for me, that's a local secondary and local primary. So schools come in all shapes and sizes. What we're going to be going through, some of us are going to talk on uniform, is that right? If you aren't up here, who isn't up here as a pair? Inclusion and uniform. I know. I've already cleaned up the hat. So at the end we'll have inclusion and uniform, yeah? So we're going to be going through, at the very beginning, schools. So what are schools, what they look like, who goes and why, and then what happens after school, or well, post-16, so there are many different things. And then what happens outside of school, and after that, the national curriculum is what's taught. So in England, I'm sure the group will say a lot more than I will, there are a set amount of things which have to be taught in every school. And then how do we assess? There are lots of different types of assessment, because England loves assessment. And I've put you up, and when it comes to the right slide, then please come up. And then English is an additional language. So we look at OCAN in Belgium, and EAL is what it's called in England. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Oliver, who's going to talk to us about primary schools. It's so yeah, for everyone, it's the bottom of the 2 hours. Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, I'm probably much less adept to this than Max, and he's lumped me in first, so it's made me look bad, I think, but hopefully it'll go okay. I'm going to be talking to you about primary education. So in the UK, education is essentially split into primary phase education and secondary phase education.
That's the later one.
Yeah.
What about it?
Oh, that one? Yeah. Right. Okay, so I'm going to be covering primary phase education, which is school types for ages 3 to 11. Okay, so including that you've got nursery education, which is non-compulsory, meaning that you don't have to send your children to nursery school, and there tend to be fees for that. Okay, and that's from the ages of 3 to 4. You've then got infant schools, which is aged 4 to 7. Junior schools for children aged 7 to 11, and then what we call primary schools. Okay, so primary schools are basically infant schools and junior schools, but all in one establishment. And quite often a primary school will also have a nursery school attached to it. Okay. So types of schools. So in England, 93% of children attend state schools. So state schools are funded by taxes. They're essentially schools that are funded by government resources. Okay. And they're mostly organised by local authorities. Then you also have independent schools. So in some parts of the world they're called public schools, some parts of the world they're called private schools, but they're independent, meaning they're independent from the state. These are schools that charge a fee to send your children to those schools. Okay? I must keep saying okay, that's what really nice teachers do, isn't it? Right, stop it. Okay. Right. So charge fees to attend. and they do not have to follow the national curriculum. Now, I'm not going to go into the national curriculum, because as you've seen before, that's on another slide. But essentially, it's the curriculum, so the subject content that all schools within the UK, all state schools within the UK, have to follow. Amongst state schools and independent schools, you will also have a large number of faith schools in the primary sector. So a faith school would be a school of religious character. So you might have a Christian school, that could be Church of England, or you could have a Catholic school, or you may have a Jewish school or an Islamic school. But what it will have a religious character to its education, or it might actually have a religious character. It might be closely associated with a religious organisation. If none of this makes sense, then just fire some questions at me, and I'll probably do a bad job of answering them, but I will at least give it a go. And then academies. So academies are a fairly recent development in the UK, and for some they're quite controversial. So a growing number of primary schools are becoming academies. So certainly where I live, in North Kent, in Midway towns, lots and lots of primary schools have become academies. Now there is an argument that they've kind of been coerced into becoming academies by the state, but that's probably for longer than a 2-minute discussion, I think. So these are publicly funded, but actually they're independent. Okay, so they're publicly funded like a state school, but they're independent from the state in terms of the way they structure their curriculum. So they can make more independent choices about how they want to structure the education within that school. And that's primary schools. I think I've covered most of the obvious areas. So if anyone's got any questions, just fire them at me. If I've talked too quickly, gulp my words, maybe said I care too much.
Do you understand him?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yes?
Yeah, maybe I want to know about maybe the subjects that they follow at the primary school.
So subjects taught in primary school. Okay. I think someone will go over that when they talk about the national curriculum, but essentially in primary school you cover everything.
Yeah.
So the core subjects, maths, English, science, then you also do history, geography, drama, art and music. But the way it's taught, I believe in primary school, things like history and geography will often be within a topic. So you might do Greece. So you might study Greece, and within that you might study the history of Greece, the literature of Greece, things like that. The primary school teachers will probably be able to give a better answer than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Yes?
Just want to understand the concept of academies. What's the difference between the academies and the normal schools?
Okay, so I'm not completely certain, and I think a lot of teachers would probably give that same answer. So academies were originally devised for very high achieving schools, because the government said, you're high achieving, you're doing something right, we're going to give you the autonomy, we're still going to give you money, we're still going to give you state money, but we're going to give you the autonomy so you can make your own decisions to improve your school, because it seems that you're doing a good job. And then the government decided to implement that with struggling schools as well. So if a school was struggling and it was in a difficult area, difficult catchment area, that they said also you can make these more independent. You can make independent decisions to try and raise standards. Subsequently, there's a lot of argument that that decision hasn't been made for that same rationale, but instead it's because the government essentially they want to decentralise the state, so shrink the state and let other people make decisions and reduce bureaucracy. But really, the money comes from the state, or there can be a sponsor, say a sponsor from a business maybe, or again a church or something like that. But you can make independent decisions about how you structure your curriculum. Yes?
So I'll just jump, because I studied academies for my degree, so education studies.
Did I get it all wrong?
No. The first reason was that they were there for successful schools to let them make their own decisions. But then the controversy came when certain schools who were failing were judged to be failing for the purpose of making an academy. So they weren't actually failing schools. And there's a whole series of books wrote on some schools were failed falsely to make an academy in an area where they wanted an academy. So that's where the controversy comes in.
Yes, actually in the area I live, in Medway, lots of schools were inspected in one go, and all of a sudden these schools that were good and outstanding were all of a sudden requires improvement. Now either it's a big coincidence and all those schools require improvement, or maybe there's an agenda from elsewhere saying we want these schools to become academies. But anyway, that gone on that, I think I should probably pass on to Max. Yeah, Max. I'll turn it off for you as well.
So you can get this back working. There we go. What I'm going to do very quickly is let's come up. It's a little diagram. There you go. So if you're not sure what to do with this, it's a little bit of a diagram. Sorry about artisting my subject. So I'll keep this very brief. And I like to get this to work. Here we go. So English secondary schools, primary, secondary, it's for older kids between ages 11 and 18. So it's compulsory, like primary school. There are three main types. I think Oliver touched on the main three. Comprehensive, academy, and grammar. And they differ insofar as comprehensive is, generally most schools are comprehensive. There's nothing particularly special or fantastic or significant about them. Grammar schools are more selective insofar as they only let a certain amount of students in who have done a test. And academies are, like Oliver said, they're a mix. So there are three main types of schools. They can be religious, they don't have to be. They can be funded by the government or privately. So you could have a grammar school which is catered for privately by the church or by a business. So after that, each student must take core subjects. So English, maths and science, every student must do. There's no left or right about that. And then when it comes to GCSE, exam which every student must sit at the ages of 15 and 16, you can choose what subjects you want to take. So you have to do English, maths and science, but you can also take art or history. After that, students could, at the age of 15 or 16, they used to be able to leave school, but now the government's made sure that everyone stays in school past 16. And you can do something called A-levels, which is another set of exams. With those A-levels, you can go on to do many different things with their qualifications. So I said I was going to be brief. That's it. Are there any questions? Excellent. All right. Is that up next?
Okay, so like Max said, it's become recently that it's compulsory, you have to stay on to 18, but you don't have to stay in school. So you've got three options that we're going to talk about.
Well, yes, the first one is apprenticeships. So, as you said, now it's compulsory. What an apprenticeship is more vocational. You have educational and vocational. What vocational pretty much means is the apprenticeship. There'll be stuff like bricklaying, painting and decorating, some type of work you want to get into. Yeah, like hands-on work. The second one that we have is sixth form.
Okay, so this is in schools, like Max was saying. So from 16 to 18, you choose more specific subjects that you want to take. So you don't have to do English, maths and science. You usually choose about 4, most schools. You choose 4 subjects that you want to take, and they're at a higher level. And these are what are going to help you to get into university. So when you apply for university, you have your GCSE grades, but you have to have your A-level. So I did science at university, so I had to have at least 2 sciences as A-level to be able to do science at university. And I understand it's different with different subjects, but that all happens inside school, not like the apprenticeship where you leave school at 16.
Yeah, and the last one is college. So these are the 3 routes you take. If you wanted to go to university, like Fern said, you'd have 6 forms, then college. You can also go to college and through college go to university. The grading's a little bit more different, but there's like a system where you get points. You have to get a certain amount of points to go to a certain university, and with college, it's graded different, but you still get those points. They're called UCAS points, and with those points, you apply to university. Every university is different in what they sort of accept.
Yeah, that's it, really.
Oh, that's pretty much it, yeah.
But college is mixed. So at college, you can go and take the A-levels that you take in sixth form. So you can do the A-level exams in college, or you could do a vocational subject, like a lot of people do like healthcare or beauty or something like that. You could do that in college as well. It's a bit of both college.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else is talking about university as well. But like one of the things we've noticed, which is different in England to Belgium, is you need certain grades to do certain courses. Like to do a teaching course, you need to have certain sort of grades to get onto a teaching course. It's very like strict in that way.
You can't apply for any university unless you're hitting.
And depending on the university you're applying to, will depend on the points they require. So you might be able to do a certain course. Like if I do sport, I could maybe go to one university with my credits, but then I couldn't apply to another with those credits, if that makes sense. So depending on what university you want to go to, might be limited on the points you get.
Yeah.
That's pretty much like that.
So we're talking, I'm Jack and Willie and Kirsty, really talking about some of the extracurricular options you can do, because when we were being told about the system in Belgium and in Flanders, one thing we did notice was there doesn't seem to be so much of an influence from the extracurricular activity, so much of an option. Because in England, for example, there are all these, and even the primary schools, even the little children will be encouraged to go and play football or go and play rugby or cricket or netball or athletics. There are options. You can go and you can represent a school, so you can go and train after school with other children from that school. You can be in the football team. You can go and represent your school, whether that's from primary school to secondary school, or in university it's really big as well. They'll have multiple teams often. But we noticed when we were being told by Belinda that Belgium doesn't seem to do that so much. There's after-school clubs. There are clubs, but they're independent from the school. Whereas in England, there's a big influence, or a lot of the schools want you to come and play sport for their school, but it's not always just what they've done.
If you press the same button, there you go, you hold it upside down. you press the same button again. So, yeah, so look at the diagram. You want the down button.
So down button.
Okay, you press the same button. The one above it. No, that's the same one.
No, that's a different one. Use your hand.
ICT technician?
Use your finger.
Just go on to the
So, as well as sport, they do, there's loads of other clubs that you can go to. So we've said in most primary and secondary schools and universities there's loads of extra activities. So we've got art, music, you can learn a musical instrument. So you can do that either, I think in primary school, it's where there were free lessons, like I learnt the recorder or something like that in primary, but you can also learn violin and things like that, but you'd have to pay for them. But you can do that also when you're in secondary school, so I learnt the piano. You'd be taken out of lessons to go and learn your music, so it doesn't happen after school, it can happen in school as well. And that can also happen at lunchtime. There's loads of different clubs, schools made up, if there's a craze out there, so like Scooby-Doo or something or whatever, they do that lunchtime, and you can also learn languages as well. There's loads.
More going questions?
Oh, it is. I'll fix it.
Okay, so I'm Rachel, this is Joe, and we're going to talk about the national curriculum, which is pretty much just all the subjects that we learn in England at school, primary through to secondary. And it came about in 1989 to ensure that all pupils across the UK got an equal education, so that there weren't people learning more things than other people or coming out with different skills, although that can sometimes still be the case. And it also wants to promote the spiritual, moral, cultural, mental and physical development of pupils. So we want to develop people that can come out of school and be able to fit into society and be an asset to society.
A rounded individual.
A rounded individual.
So it's not just learning in your subjects, it's becoming a citizen.
Becoming a citizen, yeah. Max and Ollie touched on it earlier, the core subjects. There are 4. Do you have any idea what the 4 core subjects could be? So right through from primary to secondary. So the most important subjects. Any ideas what they could be? Yep.
Math, English, science.
Yep, there's one more. We didn't mention it. Yeah?
Physical education.
It is physical education, yeah. I don't know if you remember at school, but we had we had a different option. You could do games and dance, whatever, but they do encourage people to continue doing physical education, which is obviously very important, especially in these obese days.
I don't have this slide, so I'm trying to get up.
Oh no, it's not on there, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So in primary school, as we already said, it's all pretty much everything. And then in secondary, up until GCSE point, which is when you're about, when do you choose, what age are you choosing? 14, 15. And then you can choose and narrow down which subjects you're doing, but you do still have to do the core subjects. But then you can choose things, or you can drop things like history or geography or a language. It's not compulsory to do a language at GCSE, but they have just made some changes to the primary curriculum as well. So you do learn languages in primary school. There's a bit of controversy around history, I think, which has become a bit sort of narrow and a bit more focused on Britain. And the same in English, focused on English texts and English authors and spelling. And I think that's all it.
Yeah. And so national curriculum links to this idea that's very, very popular in British schools, pupil progress. And it's the idea that a teacher should be able to track a child's development from the early stages. Key stage 1 and key stage 2 are at primary school, which Oliver spoke about. Key stage 3 is the beginning of secondary school, so from year 7 to year 9. And a teacher should be able to show that every year their student is working towards the top mark for their year group. And they used to be in a set of 8 bands. And they were organised by the Department for Education and Ofsted. So they, for each subject, they listed what level of progress a child should be achieving. And then they were split to C, B and A. So for, what should we say, year 7s, they're about a level 5. And top level 5 would be 5A, meaning that they're doing everything at that stage that they are required to do. 5C would mean that they've got some progress to make to be the top of that grade. But this year, the government decided they didn't want to use these levels anymore, and they don't want to track the students' progress in the same way, but schools are still using these levels. So it's still important to sort of understand that the national curriculum is tracked in this way. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Yeah?
Do you have a curriculum for every course, subject?
Good question, yeah. Yeah, well it's, in primary school, history, geography, English, maths, science, the 3 sciences?
One for each one.
Yeah, biology, chemistry, physics.
Yeah, the government provides targets that teachers have to get the pupils to reach.
And they're all national, everyone, each one of them.
Yeah, well, there are a few schools that don't have to follow it, but but some choose to follow it anyway because it's just there. Then you've got all the guidelines.
And then the GCSEs that children take when they're 15, 16, the topics that are covered in the national curriculum will be in those exams. So obviously, following the curriculum means your students are set to take those exams.
Are some secondary schools often named by the level, like an A-level school or a B-level school?
No.
I don't like Valley Park or Invicta. You know, the schools in Medway or no, in Maidstone. Are they called about with an A-level?
It might have a specialism in
Computer technology
Yeah.
sometimes as well, and sports.
Yeah.
in one area. I don't know. I think they're just generally or it might just be A-level college
Yeah.
if that's the only course that they offer.
With my secondary school when I was in Joy, mine was Hexbury School Performing Arts. It had like the name of the school and then it had what its mission was underneath.
Okay.
It's part of the title, but they shortened it.
Okay.
And my old school started offering the international baccalaureate, so they called it an IB school, but then it stopped, so they took it away.
Alright. My name is Alejandro.
Paula.
And we are going to talk about assessment for learning. So let me start first with a definition. It's an integral part of teaching to be used positively to inform pupils of progress, to improve future planning and target setting as a tool for motivation. So after reading this, what do you think assessment for learning is? Could I have an answer from someone? After reading that definition, why it is so helpful for teachers in the classroom? Assessment for learning. Anyone?
Setting targets so the student can meet it.
Yeah. So assessment for learning are all the activities undertaken by the teachers and by the pupils, yeah, in assessing themselves. So when we gather all this information, we use it as a feedback to modify teaching and learning activities. So we grab this information and from that point we plan our lessons to improve, yeah, the teachers. Principles of formative assessment. I believe that the learner can improve. We as a teacher always believe that every student can improve. Even the most able student can improve. Feedback to the student. This is really important. We have to communicate with our students all the time. We need to know where they are and where they have to be. And all the structures, all the different methods that we have to put in place to move these students from one level to the other.
Alejandro, just on that point, it's really important that it's not teacher focused. So it's kind of like a collaborative assessment where the teacher and the student are working together. So it's not just the teacher saying, I need to know where they are and where they need to be. It's the student also being involved in that progress.
and that increases their morale and their sense of achievement, so it spurs them on to achieve more and learn more.
Active involvement in learning. We are in a classroom because we want our children to improve, to learn, to be knowledgeable. For that reason, they are the main focus, the main target in our classroom, and they have to be involved. They are the best students, the best people who have to be involved. The importance of people motivation and self-esteem. When we do assessment, when we do an activity and we grab some data, we try to motivate the student to make them improve. So for that reason, we have to communicate with them, let them know where they are. As I said before.
So from that point, basically, we do mini chunks of information. So we don't do like 30 minutes of a lesson and then do some formative assessment, because it's not summative, it's not an exam, it's kind of ongoing assessment, which is what we're talking about. So we might do a little activity or a grammar quiz, for example, one of my language classes, and check that people are understanding it, or if they're not understanding it. And so therefore they can say, oh yeah, I understand how to make the perfect tense, I can talk in the past. And they feel that they've achieved something, and then we build upon that. So it's like little building blocks getting higher and higher.
So that's related to the last point as well, and just in teaching to take account of the result of assessment. We plan lessons, and with the results, the evaluation, we carry on planning lessons. It's a whole process. You want to start?
Okay.
Questioning.
Okay, so throughout the class, you'd be asking different questions. Or you could be saying, eliciting information. So not asking a direct question, but saying, what do you think we're going to be talking about today? And there might be an image up on the board. Or there might be a keyword. And you say, okay, talk with your pairs, 30 seconds. What's the topic we might be looking at? The next one?
Feedback. As we said before, communication with our students, always positive all the time, constructive, try not to let down the students and communicate, and we can carry on with the self-assessment.
Okay, so self-assessment and peer assessment are often very closely linked. In England, a lot of the students are told, and it's kind of instilled in them, that they have to self-assess. So look at your work, what do you think's wrong with it? Try and correct it before you hand it in. Before you feed back to the class and give your answers, have another look at it, see how you can improve it. So it would be from a language point of view, it would be from a content point of view, from how you argue a point, so it could be looking at logic, so it's lots of different elements. The teachers want the students to do that because they want them to have a clear view of where they need to go. So on our first slide, we had a picture where it had road signs, and it's kind of like, okay, I've got to this point, but where do I need to go now to improve? So the student would look at their work and say, okay, I think the content's pretty good, but the way I express myself is bad, so I need to work on maybe structure, or grammar, or spelling. And then moving on to the peer assessment, it's actually done as a positive thing, so it's not as a negative. So for example, in my language classes when I teach French and German, we might do translation, and I'll say, how do you say, I went to the shops? And so they write down, je suis allé au magasin. And they would all do it on a little board. So you would have a little board where you could write, rub off, change things, so you don't feel under pressure for it to be perfect. I might get ferns, and take it up and I say, okay, let's have a look at ferns, does it look good, should we change it? And then I would get feedback on how the students are doing. Fern would have a perfect answer, so she feels motivated that she's done a great job. But also, if there's something that needs to be changed, we can also feedback as a group to change it. So it's really important that the students can look at each other's work and figure out where the mistakes are so that they themselves can improve. Another technique which they use quite a lot is you do some work in your book and then you swap with somebody. So not the person next to you, somebody completely different. Have a look at their work, and then you put down what went well. So you would put something positive about their work to encourage them and to improve self-esteem. And then you put even better if. So what the student thinks could make that maybe half a mark higher or move up to the next level. So it's all creating a positive learning environment.
Peer assessment as well, because I'm a modern foreign languages teacher. What I do, I try to improve speaking. For me, it's really important to improve speaking. So what I do is ask a question to a student, and with that answer, the other students, they give some feedback through that question. Yeah, it all together, the whole class will build a whole answer. That will be the peer assessment, and this will be the conclusion. We plan our lessons, we teach them, including the learning assessment, and we evaluate them. We get the results, and with your results, we carry on learning lessons.
One thing, it's important to say that as training teachers, we're taught to actually plan these assessment opportunities within the class. So it's not just ad hoc. Who got 4 out of 5, raise your hand. We're putting that within our lesson plans so that we know that we've got this formative assessment all the way through the class.
All right. Have you got any questions at all?
I was wondering what you think are the positive things and negative things about this work format.
I really like it because I think it takes pressure off pupils and they can see that they're improving without having to do, I've got like a 200-word vocabulary test on Friday. And you can really see where you're falling down and you can adapt the class. So if I have students, they have no idea how to make the future tense in French, I can just take a step back, throw my lesson plan to the side and just go back to basics.
Yeah.
So I think it's really helpful for that because you can adapt.
Do you think there's something negative about the approach? Something about to improve yourself perhaps? But
I would say negative if, for example, the self-assessment, if they don't understand your marking criteria as a teacher, yeah, if you don't communicate with them and they don't know how to mark exams, or with the peer assessment, if they are not honest with each other, or just because it's your friend who is marking your work, so that would be something negative as well.
Yeah, I think there's more positives than negatives.
Just wondering.
Yeah, do you have something negative if you feel bad about it?
I love the approach as well. The thing is, indeed, people have to be objective. Like, okay, it's my friend, but I have to be honest with him. It's for the good of the pupil, of course.
Yeah.
That's very important in this kind of evaluation, actually.
That's why I always swap from the opposite side of the room, because your friend's going to be next to you. So you give her a great mark because she's your friend. But I would make you swap. Or we would do it as a group. So we're looking at somebody's whiteboard in isolation as a group. So I try to use positive reinforcement rather than saying, this is really bad. Let's constructively do it together and work as a team. So it's like a team activity. And even the teacher can make mistakes. So everybody's in it together.
Okay, yeah.
I've got another question. I've seen you're working hand in hand with the student to make them improve on their learning. But what happens if you find that though you're working hard for a student to pass, but he's a little bit backwards, he doesn't go forward? Do they fail? Do they have to repeat a class? What actually happens?
You can't repeat in England. So it's not like the American system where you redo the grade. You couldn't redo the year again. So there's a big push for differentiation, which can be really difficult. So if you have a comprehensive school where you've got people that are very academically able, some in the middle, and those that have some learning difficulties, I think that's one of the most challenging things of being a teacher in the UK, is you have to cater for all these different activities. So when I do work, I would have one section where I always have tricky things. So if you find this bit too easy, do it. Then move on to the tricky thing. Or if I've got some students that can't access the main activity, then I'm going to have to give them a different sheet. Or get them just to do the first bit of it. But I think that's actually really difficult where we've got mostly non-selective schools. I think the only other thing to say on that point is most schools have a learning support unit. So if you've got a child who really can't access most of the core lessons, so English, Science, Math, they can be withdrawn and do their own English, Science, Maths within the learning support unit with specialist teachers one-on-one. So then they can kind of come in and out of the mainstream classroom.
That's good.
So as you can see, 4 of us talking about it. It's a big thing in the UK school system. We're moving over from formative assessment to summative assessment. So once you've taught everything in the course of a year or a term, finding out how the pupils have done. And from what I heard from Belinda and Ada back in the UK, they were telling us about the Belgium school system, and there's no national standardised exams in Belgium, or in Flanders, should I say, which is quite different to England. So what happens with us is even from primary, when you're 7 years old, there will be standardised national exams that you take, so it's quite young really. These are called SATs, and they are taken in English, maths and science, and pupils will take them when they're 7 at the end of Key Stage 1, when they've completed that part of the national curriculum, and then they'll take them again when they're 11, that's at the end of Key Stage 2, so they've done the second section of the national curriculum. So that's their national standardised exams. Every pupil in every school in England, or in Scotland as well, is it SATs as well, in all parts of the UK? Yeah. So England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, they will sit the same exam in every single school, every pupil. So the reason that is done is to have a reliable judgment of pupil progress. If every school was doing something slightly different, you might not be able to find out exactly how pupils are doing and average it out and then help them all to progress. Then, as I said there, it can make developments in the curriculum. You can look at the national curriculum and say, oh, maybe we should change something, because it's like a lot of pupils aren't getting that. Another really quite important thing in the UK with SATs is to find out how schools are doing, if schools are working effectively. So it's not really to judge the pupils, it's to see how the schools are teaching and if they're doing it in the most effective way. So now the good things, the good reasons for that. There are some criticisms in that, you know, for the whole of a pupil's school life, they're working towards exams in a way, so it can be quite stressful for a 7-year-old to have to do that. So you really need to pitch the exams in the right way, so a 7-year-old doesn't feel like they're under pressure. And the teachers, a lot of the time, feel under pressure because their school's going to be judged on its effectiveness compared to all the other schools. And parents will decide where their pupils are going to go based on this. At the moment, or until this year, pupils are given a level, as Jo and Rachel were saying, a level from 1 to 8 of how they're doing. Now those have been removed. Undecided really at the moment how schools will move on, whether they'll keep those, if they have a new system, it's all up to them. As I said, it's only in English, Maths and Science that there's those national exams at primary school. Otherwise, schools can decide how they're going to assess and how they're going to judge a pupil's progress in all of the other subjects. That's not standardised and national at that young of an age. And then when they go to secondary school, from 11 to 14, there's none of those national exams either. They used to be age 14, but they withdrew those. They don't do them anymore. So then the other big important exams come when they turn 14, and we're going to hear a bit more about
this
that.
will be really interesting. You have to bear with me with the technology, as I always say to the children in the schools as well. Okay, so the big exams which are taken, or the big qualifications which are taken between the ages of 14 and 16 in secondary schools, the GCSEs. And, okay, so I'm going to bring up the first information. Which one is it? That one there, thank you. I was too scared to press anything. Okay, so GCSE stands for General Certificate of Education. And they are usually taken by pupils between the ages of 14 and 16, and they're taken through several competing examination boards who create the kind of the qualification format slightly differently to each other, and then it's down to the schools to choose which examination board they're actually going to use for the GCSEs. Which there have been some criticisms of that in itself, in that there are some schools which may, for example, go for the examining board which they feel would be the easiest option and allow their pupils to achieve the highest grades. That's obviously not the case with every school. Okay, so GCSEs are taken in specific academic subjects. Some GCSE subjects are compulsory, so that's the core subjects of maths, English and science. I don't think, although we're saying PE is a compulsory subject, it's not the case with GCSE, is it? No, certainly wasn't when I did it. Okay, and so then other subjects are optional, for example, history and geography and foreign languages, although some schools may make certain of the optional subjects compulsory, like some schools may say you have to either do history or geography. Okay, and so how pupils are assessed at GCSE. Right, so this does actually vary according to GCSE subjects. For example, I had to take my maths GCSE not that long ago to get onto the teacher training course, and it was simply a horrible exam right at the end of it, which I only had about 3 months to prepare for. But anyway, so some GCSEs are purely exams, which you may take at the end of the 2 years of GCSE study, or whenever you want, if you're an adult and you want to go back to study GCSE, which you can do. So you don't have to do GCSEs when you're between 14 and 16. You can go on to do them later on if you want to, as you wish. And then many GCSE subjects at the moment, they're assessed through a combination of exams and controlled assessment. And controlled assessment is where you do coursework, usually in a classroom under controlled conditions. Okay, and GCSE grades at the moment, they're from A to G, or A star to G, in fact, with A star being the highest grade that you can receive, or U, which stands for ungraded, so that's when you haven't actually passed the GCSE. Okay, so criticism of current GCSEs. Apparently this is one of the favourite words of our previous Minister for Education, Michael Gove. We've heard, he said that the current GCSEs are not rigorous enough. So that even though he's not actually the Education Minister anymore, it's now Nicola Morgan, the current government are, as they say, they're working to make them more rigorous. Okay, so another criticism is that although there isn't actually for all the GCSEs the big pressure of having an exam at the end of the 2 years. Even so, with all the controlled assessment, the coursework, the workload is actually too large. So that's another criticism of the GCSEs as they are at the moment. And quite possibly as well that because there may be so much specific focus on work to specifically pass the GCSEs as they are at the moment, the knowledge gained through the GCSE studies may not be broad enough. Okay, so from September 2005, the GCSEs are starting to change in a big way. There are no more modules, so whereas before there were modules where you would do controlled assessment coursework or possibly do exams in stages, there are simply going to be final examinations which are taken at the end of the 2 years of study. And no more controlled assessment for most subjects, and no more of that coursework which is usually taking place under controlled conditions. And also the grading system of the GCSEs is changing, so it will no longer be A star to G, and it will be 1 to 9. With, it's just gone out of my head, with 1 being the highest, or is it 9 is the highest?
9 the highest, it's changed around.
9's the highest, yes, yes. And as the end of the tiered system, because that was the other point as well, is that with the current system, the GCSEs are tiered higher and lower. So if you enter at the lower tier, you can usually only receive a C as the highest grade. And if you are working towards a D to an A star, you need to enter for the highest tier. So you will no longer have to actually take that option of entering the higher or the lower tier, which I suppose allows room for progression later on if you're not doing so well in the earlier stages of study for the exams. So what do you think about the changes to the systems? Would anybody like to make any comments on moving away from a large coursework component to going towards exams? You want any comments on that, or otherwise any other questions about this? Yes.
I do have a question concerning the changing of grades from A to G and 1 to 9. I would like to know what are the real changes and what made the government or whatever who is concerned with the assessment